All right, so math, again, 4 to 6 questions on the test are really not that hard. Some of the formulas, and somebody asked about formulas last night. Um, and that's the one we always talk about is the amount of earnings is equal to the principal times the rate. If you put money into a savings account, the amount of money that you're going to earn on your savings account is equal to the amount of money you put in times the rate of your return that the bank is offering you. And this same formula, whether it's about putting money into a savings account, or whether it's about, let's admit the people who showed up, or whether it's about how much return you'd get on an investment, or even what your commission is going to be. So if we say earnings is equal to principal times rate, it's really the same formula as your commission is equal to the sales price of the house times the rate of commission. And we'd have to learn how to manipulate this equation. So we could remember earnings is equal to principal times rate, or commission is equal to sales price times rate of commission. But they're always going to ask the question where they're going to ask us to solve for something else. Like they'll ask us to solve for the rate of commission, or they'll ask us to solve how much is the principal. So we have to learn how to what we call manipulate that formula, so that the formula is it has different forms that it can present itself in just by changing where the variables go. And this is like the very first thing you learn in algebra. This is like the very first thing. Unfortunately, we all had algebra when we were just becoming teenagers, and we were interested in other things besides algebra, so it's all gone from our brain. One of the ways I like to do it is the little circle with the E up top, and then I put principal or price down here, and then interest rate or commission rate down here for the rate of return. And then we put a divide sign in the middle there, divided sign, and we put a multiplication sign down here. And whichever thing you wanted to find, say you wanted to find principal, you would put your finger over principal, and it tells you to do then earnings divided by rate. Say you wanted to find rate, you would put your finger over rate, and then you would say rate is equal to earnings divided by principal. Say you wanted to find the earnings. Well, your commission or your earnings, we put our finger over that, and it tells us to do principal times rate. So that's a really simple little thing that somebody in class came up with, and it seems to work pretty well. But you'll have questions where they'll give you some of the stuff, and you're going to have to manipulate the formula. Not hard to do. The next thing is, it's always a question on the test, how big is an acre? And an acre is 43,560 square feet. That's always a question on the test. We also have to remember for the test, how big is a yard? A yard is 3 feet. And when do we have to know how big a yard is? Well, you might be figuring out cubic yards in terms of ordering a dumpster or ordering concrete, which is sometimes a question on the test. So we have to remember that 1 cubic yard is equal to 27 cubic feet. And that's because a cubic yard means 1 yard times 1 yard times 1 yard, which is 1 yard to the third power. And something to the third power is called the cube of that number. That's why we call it a cubic yard, not because of its shape, but because it's yards to the third power. So 1 yard to the third power is equal to 27 feet to the third power. How do we come up with 27? Because there's 3 feet in the yard. So 1 yard is 3 feet. So we're going to multiply 3 feet times 3 feet times 3 feet. And 3 times 3 is 9 times 3 is 27. And that gives us 27 feet to the third power, or 27 cubic feet. So 27 cubic feet is the same thing as 1 cubic yard. And if we back up 1 square yard, and again, square means 1 yard times 1 yard, which is yards to the second power, and yards, anything to the second power is called the square. So 1 square yard times 1 square yard, and there's 3 feet in the yard. You'd say 3 feet times 3 feet is 9. So 1 square yard equals 9 square feet. And you can kind of see how the conversions go. 1 yard is equal to 3 to the first power. So 3 feet. 1 square yard is equal to 3 to the second power, because that's what the square is. 3 times 3 is 9. And 1 cubic yard is equal to 27 cubic feet. 3 times 3 times 3. When you have a question about how much dirt or how much concrete to order for a sidewalk, always remember what a 40 cubic yard dumpster looks like. Because if you're ordering a small piece of sidewalk, you're not going to order a whole 40 cubic yard dumpster full of concrete. Another time this comes into play is when you're ordering carpet. Carpet comes in a good store, in an extensive store, carpet comes by the square yard. So if something is $1 a square yard, it's the same thing as $9 per square foot. I'm sorry, if something is $9 a square, it's the opposite way around. Something that is $9 a square yard is $1 a square foot. Something that is $9 a square yard is $1 a square foot. So if you're buying carpet, you see something that says $9 a square yard or $1 a square foot, you might be tricked into buying the thing that's $1 a square foot, but essentially it's the same price as $9 a square yard. And that's because, yes.
There is maybe any chance to like convert it to meters and then do the math
Oh, no.
here? Not
Oh,
a
no.
chance, huh? For
No.
me, it's like a whole new
Yeah.
language. I
We,
go with
yep.
meters and it's,
Meters and centimeters. And we were
yeah.
supposed to all be using the decimal system, but they chickened out. The government
Wow.
chickened out. We were 1980s. We were supposed to convert to the metric system.
Why?
This is called the
Did you do that?
avoir system. It's based on French measurements. It's
Mm.
crazy. All right. The next thing that's always on the test is loan to value ratio. This is in order for a lender to find out if, in the worst case scenario, they have to take the house back and sell it. Is there enough money for them to break even? So the definition of loan to value ratio is the loan amount, and they're always going to trick you by telling you something other than the loan amount, but it's the loan amount divided by the appraised value or the sales price, whichever is lower. So loan to value ratio is always the loan amount, not the sales price, the loan amount, how much you're borrowing, divided by the appraised value or the sales price, whichever is lower. One of the questions on the test that they ask is, why did they use whichever one is lower here? Why did they use either the appraised value or the sales price, whichever one is lower? And the answer that's on the test is because buyers sometimes tend to overinflate the value of the home they're buying. In other words, they pay more than the home is really worth. So they're going to use the sales price or the appraised value, whichever is lower. The next one is the front end ratio and the back end ratio. The front end ratio is established when a borrower goes and fills out the uniform residential loan application. When the borrower fills out the uniform residential loan application, it's a 4-page document, has all kinds of questions on it. But when they fill all that out, they're going to look to see if the mathematics support that you will be able to afford to make your payments. And the definition of the front end ratio is principal, interest, taxes, and insurance. So PITI, the principal on your loan payment, the interest on your loan payment, the taxes on your house, the homeowner's insurance on your house, divided by income. So your front end ratio is PITI divided by income. There's also a back end ratio, and the back end ratio is PITI plus consumer debt, plus whatever monthly payment you have to make on your credit card divided by income, or your car payment divided by income. And again, typically on this front end ratio, they want to see a ratio of around 28%. And on the back end ratio now, typically they'll go to 50%. So you'll have a question on the test, maybe, and they'll give you a set of data points that show you what the income of the person is, what their monthly interest payment is, what their monthly principal payment is, what their quarterly taxes is, and what their yearly insurance payment is. The trick to these questions is everything has to be converted to the same unit. So PITI, everything's either got to be by the month or by the year. PITI plus consumer debt, everything's got to be by the month or be by the year. And then, of course, income has got to be the same consistent unit. So if you're doing PITI plus consumer debt by the month, then income has got to be by the month also. You must have consistent units. If you're doing PITI plus consumer debt by the year, then income's got to be by the year because you must have consistent units. You're always better off to convert this to by the month So they may tell you somebody's making $120,000 a year. How do you convert that to the month? Well, you divide it by 12. They might tell you they're making $50,000 a year. That's a little tougher. Well, you'd have to divide 50,000 by 12. They might tell you they're making $1,500 a week. Then you would multiply 1,500 times 52 weeks, and that would be your yearly, and then divide it by 12, and that would give you your monthly. So all you're going to be doing is manipulating numbers to get consistent units. The next thing is points. Points are something that nobody really understands, but they're really just extra prepaid interest that you pay in advance, money that you pay in advance to have the privilege of borrowing money. And each point is 1% of the loan amount. And they always try to trick you because they're going to give you a question and they're not going to tell you the loan amount. Instead, they're going to tell you the sales price and how much the buyer is putting down. And then you'll have to go backwards from the sales price and subtract the down payment, and that'll tell you how much the loan is. So each point is 1% of the loan amount. If you're borrowing $150,000 and you're paying 1 point, it's $1,500. Another weird thing is whenever you pay 8 points, you can change the yield by 1%. So if you have a 4% loan as a borrower and you want a 3% loan, you would pay 8 points. That means you'd pay 8 percentage points of the loan amount. And then they would reduce your annual interest rate by 1%. And if you do the math on that, and sometimes they give you a question to do the math on that, usually you break even on the 8th year. So if you're going to live in your house for 30 years, you would pay the 8 points to get your rate reduced by 1%. And after the 8th year, it would come out in your favor because your payments would be lower, but you've already paid back all of the money you laid out for the 8 points. Sometimes they give you a question and they ask you, where's the break-even point when you pay points? The next thing is in the income approach. In the income approach to appraisals, the formula is value is equal to net operating income divided by the cap rate. So here we're going to go again with just regular 9th grade algebra. So if our cap rate, remember the cap rate is on the bottom of the formula now, value is equal to NOI divided by cap rate. If our cap rate goes up, what happens to our value? And the value's on the top over here, the cap rate's on the bottom over here, so they're inverse relationships. So if the cap rate goes up, the value goes down, okay? Because they're inverse relationships. Quite often they'll ask you, what happens if the cap rate goes up? Cap rate goes up, the value does the opposite. What happens if the cap rate goes down? Then the value goes up. And they also might ask you that using this formula, what happens if the NOI goes up? Now, the NOI is in the numerator of this equation. So it is a direct relationship with value. So if the NOI goes up, then the value goes up. If the NOI goes down, then the value goes down. And again, somebody told me that they had a question that they didn't quite understand the other night. And the question was, let's see if I can remember it correctly. A house has $70,000 in NOI. And if they could increase that $70,000 to $100,000, how much value would it add? And so to go from 70,000 to 100,000, that means our ROI would go up by 30,000. How much value does that add? And I think they said that the cap rate was 5%. And so we would divide that $30,000 increase by the 5%. And if we took $30,000, I'm getting a lot of texts tonight from people who didn't get the invitation. I don't know whether I got labeled a spammer tonight or what. But,
I didn't get the invitation either, and it wasn't in my spam, so I emailed Lee and she sent it to me, but I was curious too.
I don't know what happened. They might have, popped me off then. So that gives us a value of 600,000. Let me see if I can get this person who just asked an invitation. One second. Gotta do this the old-fashioned way. All right, sorry about that. I don't know what happened to it tonight. All right, here's a couple of easy questions. This is from the first slide that we had up there. A house sells for $122,000 and the commission is 6.25% of the selling price. How much is your commission? The commission that comes in on the house. Okay, there's Alexandra. She got it. So this is an easy one, right? How much is the commission? Sorry about that. That's earnings is equal to price times rate. So 122,000. The question here is, how do you write 6 1/4? Well, you're going to write it as 0.0625. So we would go 122,000 times 0.0625, and that would give us 76.25 would be the commission that came in. 122,000 times 0.0625 is 76.25. Okay, so earnings is equal to principal times rate. We're solving for earnings. So again, earnings is equal to the price of the house times the rate. Earnings is equal to 76.25. Okay, number 2, a broker is to earn a fee of 6% of the sales price of a house. If the house is listed for $98,000 and is sold for $3,000 less than that, what will the broker earn in commission? Now, this is a question they put up all the time on the test. It's an easy one. It's it seems to be a little tricky, but it's not. They're just making sure that you know that it was listed for 98 and it sold for $3,000 less than that. That means it sold for 95,000. So again, earnings is equal to sales price times rate. The sales price was 98,000. It sold for 3,000 less, which is 95,000. 95,000 times 0.06 is 5,700. Now, they're going to have this is a multiple choice question. So they're going to have a incorrect answer on there that's the same as 98,000 times 0.06. So they're going to have an incorrect answer on there of 5,880 to catch the people who forget to subtract that $3,000. All right, a seller will pay a broker $1,000 for advertising plus 4% of the sales price. If the property sells for $250,000, how much does the broker get? So they're going to pay the broker $1,000 for the advertising plus 4% of the sales price. The property sells for $250. 250 times 4% is 10,000. 250 times 0.04 is 10,000 plus $1,000. Broker's going to get $11,000. These are really, really simple questions, but they always throw one little tiny extra thing in there just so that they have an opportunity to potentially trip you up. All right, this one is always on the test, and it's a lot easier than you think it is. So a man devised his estate. In other words, he died and he left it to 54% to his wife, 18% to his daughter, and 16% to his son. Whatever was left would go to the church. The church received 79,000. How much did the daughter get? Okay, and this is really a lot easier than you think. First thing we want to do is find out what percentage the church got. So the total percentage is 100%. If you subtract the 16%, the 18%, and the 54%, what's left is the percentage that the church got. So 54 plus 18 plus 16 is equal to 88. So the total commission was the total split percentage was 100% minus the 88 that those three people got, left 12% back for the church. The church got 12%. And if we take now the 79,000, because the question is telling us that the church got 79,000, the question is telling us the church got 79,000. So we're going to take that 79,000 and we're going to divide it by 12%. That means if we take 79,000 divided by 12%, each percentage point is going to be 6583.33. Each percentage is 6583.33. And they're asking how much did the daughter get? So the daughter had 18%. So we're just going to multiply then 18% or 18 times 6583.33. And the daughter got 118,500. So all we did was two steps. One was to find out how much the church got. Step two was to find out how much each percentage was. Step three was to multiply how much each percentage was by what percentage the daughter had, and you came out with 118,500. A second way to do it is by the rule of proportions. 79,000 is to 12% as X, the daughter's share in money is to 18%. So that's another way you could do it. 79,000 is to 12% as X is to 18. You're going to solve for X. The way you solve for X, we want to get rid of this 18. So we're going to multiply both sides of the equation by 18. 18 divided by 18 is 1. So we have just X now isolated on this side. And then we have to, if we multiply this side of the equation by 18, we have to multiply this side of the equation by 18. So we would do 18 times 79,000. And then we have to still divide by 12. And we come up with the same number. Okay, that's by using the rules of what's called the rule of proportions. This is the first method is a little simpler method. This is an easier method if you remember the rule of proportions. This is to this, is that, is to that. And then you have to solve for X. 79,000 is to 12%, as how much did his daughter get is to 18%. After paying a 7% commission of $96.75, how much did the seller receive from the sale of his house? This is a two-step question again. So first thing, we're going to have to find out what is the sales price. And so we know from other ones, we're looking for the sales price. And we know that the earnings is equal to the sales price times the rate. So we're looking for sales price. So we're going to divide this side of the equation by rate. That crosses out and becomes a 1. And then we're going to divide earnings by rate. So we're going to say earnings divided by rate is equal to sales price. So earnings divided by rate is equal to sales price. And then once we find the sales price, we have to take away the commission. And then that's how much the seller received. Okay, so let's look at that. Earnings is equal to sales price times commission rate. The net is equal to sales price minus commission. Sales price is equal to earnings divided by the commission rate. So again, our sales price of $97.65 gives us a sales price of $139,500. Our $97.65 divided by 0.07 gives us $139,500. And then $139,500 minus what the commission is, which is $97.65, means that the seller ended up with $129,735. Again, after paying a 7% commission of $97.65, how much did the seller receive? So first thing we're going to find out is what the sales price was. And we do that by dividing $97.65 by 0.07. And then when we find that number, we're going to subtract what was paid in commission because that's how much the seller received. So again, a lot easier than it looks. Okay, this is a real problem with real life numbers. A 10-acre plot is going to be subdivided into building houses, major subdivision. They're going to need an environmental impact statement. So 16% of the land is going to be used for streets. If you're making a neighborhood, you're going to have to leave some of the land for streets. So how many lots are possible if you need 80 by 120 lots? So the first thing you want to do is find out how many square feet are in 10 acres. We know an acre is 43,560. So we're just going to add a 0 on the end of that. That multiplies it by 10 times. And then what we're going to do is we're going to subtract 16% from there. And then we're going to find out what the square foot of 80 by 120 lots is, and then divide that into what we have left. So 10 acres times 43,560 is 435,600. That's how many square feet we have. Our lots are 80 by 120, so they're 9,600 square feet. 16% of our land has to be used for roads. So we're going to take our total land, which is 435,600. That's our total land. And we're going to take away 16%. The easiest way to take away 16% is to multiply by 0.84. Because if you take away 16%, what's left is 84%. So 435,600 times 0.84. What's left to build houses on is 365,904. And if that's how many square feet we have left to build houses on. So if we take that 365,904 and we divide it by 9,600, we come up with 38.115, and you can't build a 115 of a house. So it means we can build 38 different lots. We have 38 different lots on the property. All right. So again, it's just a problem that kind of revolves around 2 steps, and we just got to work our way through 2 steps. You can be absolutely sure that there will be an incorrect answer that will reflect 435,600. That number divided by 96 because you forgot to take out the lots. You forgot to take out the land that's required for the streets. So you know there'll be an incorrect answer of 435,600 divided by 9,600. And that's probably going to give you, let's see how many lots that would give you. 435,600 divided by 9,600. That would give you 45 lots. So there's going to be a wrong answer in there, but you know, A, B, C, and D. A will be 38 lots. B will be 45 lots. Because if you forget to take out the streets, then you'd come up with a bigger number. All right, how many acres is 348,480 square yards? This is a little bit of a tricky question I threw in here. How many acres is 348,480 square yards? Remember, acres is in square feet, right? Acres is 43,560 square feet. So if we have 348,480 square yards, if we multiply it by 9, because there's 9 square feet in a square yard. So we have 348,480 square yards. That means if we multiply it by 9, that's how many square feet we have. So we have 3,126,320 square feet. And we know that an acre is 43,560 square feet. So if we divide that 3 million number by 43,560, we find out that our property is 72 acres. Again, just going back and forth with the conversions. This is always on the test also. The last monthly interest payment on a mortgage was $825.71. If the interest rate is 7.2%, how much is owed on the principal? So again, what we have is our old E earnings with principal times rate on the bottom. Earnings is equal to principal times rate. And if we manipulate the formula, what we end up getting is principal is equal to rate divided by earnings. So what we're looking for is our last monthly payment was $825.77, but this 7.2% is by the year because interest rates are always by the year. So we have to multiply that 825.77 times 12. That shows us that we have the earnings over the year of 9909.24. So our principal is $9,909.24 divided by 0.072 because our interest rate is 7.2%. So we're going to divide it by 0.072, and that gives us a principal of $137,628.33. So again, from just the information about what our monthly interest payment was and what our interest rate was, we can tell how much we owe. Now, this is the last, one more math question after this for tonight. A list price was set so that the owner could net $90,000 after they paid a 6% commission. And this is what we talked about the other night. How much did it sell for? So what we have to do is we know we have to take the 90,000 and we have to divide it by the number that you would add to 6% to get 100. And that number would be 94. So we're going to take we're going to take our price of $90,000 and we're going to divide it by 0.94, and that's going to give us our sales price. So we're going to take our $90,000 divided by 0.94. That means our sales price is going to be $95,744. $95,744. Now, if we wanted, and 68 cents, if we wanted to test it, if we came up with that answer and we wanted to test it, we would take that number, 95,744.68, and we would take away 6%. How do we take away 6%? Well, if you take away 6%, what's left? 94%. So we're going to multiply 95,744.68 times 0.94, and that gets us back to the 90,000 that we need for the correct answer. And again, this is always on the test. That's why we talked about this last night too. An office manager was paid $1,000 a month plus 0.25% on all office sales. If her pay for July was $2,780, how much were her monthly sales? So we know that the first $1,000 was her flat fee. The $1,780 that was more than the $1,000, the increase, has to be this amount of sales she did times 0.25%. So if we take the $2,780, we take away her flat fee, which is $1,000. That means her bonus, so to speak, was based on $1,780. $1,780 represents the amount of sales times 0.25%. And again, that's a tough one to remember. Here's how we write 0.25%. 0.0025. And if you're not sure of that, just remember that you would write 1% as 0.01. So you know that 0.25% has got to be a smaller number than 0.01. So we would have 0.00 and then a quarter, 0.25. So 0.0025.
And how you do the quarter in with the percentage on the calculator?
I don't know. I don't ever use the percentage.
On the test, I can use the percentage?
I don't know how to use a percentage key on a calculator. I've never used it.
It's the same basically like when you do the 0.0025 or the 0.01, I just do 1% and it gives me the same answer.
Okay. But what 1% is on a calculator, it means you're dividing it. It's doing that conversion. So it's actually doing if you wanted to do it on your calculator, you divide by 0.25 and then hit the percent. And then because what it's doing is it's automatically dividing it by 100.
Okay.
Okay. So now 1780 is made up of that represents her sales times 0.0025. So to solve for sales, we're going to take 1780 and divide it by 0.0025 because we're just manipulating the equation, and it's going to tell us her sales are 712,000. Now, again, you want to check it. So what you do is you take your 712,000 and multiply it by 0.0025, and we can see that comes up with 1780. And 1780 then plus the $1,000 flat fee gives us the number we're looking for, which is the 2780. Okay, this is another common one on the test. The house was purchased 3 years ago for 200,000. Each year it appreciated 10%. What is it worth now? So this is an example of compound interest. So it goes up in value, and then next year it goes up 10% again, but you're getting that 10% on the increase too. So the first year was 200,000. It went up 10%. So we would multiply it times 1.1 because it went up 10%. You could also find out what 10% was of 200 and just add it on. Does the same thing. So 10% of 200,000 is 20,000. 200,000 plus 20,000, it gives you 220. Or you could multiply it by 1.1. Either way works. So that's after 1 year, it's worth 220. Now, here's the second year, it's worth 220. It goes up another 10%. After 2 years, it's worth 242. And now the third year, it goes up another 10%. So it goes from 242 times 1.1 again. Now it's worth 266,200. So the answer is 266,200. And I like this problem because this illustrates how valuable it is to own real estate. Because if you have 3 years in a row of 10% increase in value, we had 10% increase in value around here last year. We're probably going to have 10% increase in value again this year. You've gone from $200,000 worth of an asset to $266,000 in 3 years. So you've made $66,000 in 3 years. It's one of the beauties of owning real estate is compound of interest. All right, and the last one is in order to earn $1,000 a month on an investment of 3%, what must your interest rate be? So if you're looking to retire and you want to have $1,000 a month from your investment and you know you're going to get 3%, how much money so this is actually, this question is wrong. This should say, what should the principal be? It shouldn't say, what should the interest rate be? I'm sorry. It should say, what should the principal be? There's a typo on here. It should be asking you here, what should the principal be? So we're going to do it as if it said the right thing. What should the principal be? And the earnings is equal to principal times rate. We want $12,000 a year in earnings, right? Because $1,000 a month is $12,000 a year. So we would need our principal times 0.03%. So we're going to solve for principal. We're going to isolate principal on its own. And if we manipulate the formula to isolate for principal, principal is equal to earnings divided by rate. And that means we would have to have $400,000 in the bank. So if you had $400,000 in the bank and you could put it in at 3% interest, here's your double check, $400,000 in the bank times 3% interest. That gives you $12,000 a year because the 3% is an APR, which means annual percentage rate. And then $12,000 a year gives you $1,000 a month in income. What that should tell you, by the way, is these very low interest rates we have right now means it's impossible for people to retire, because if you're only getting 1% on your investment and you put $400,000 in the bank, you're only going to get $4,000 a year in income. And that's not enough to survive. All right, and this is our last one, question 13. I keep saying it's the last one, but I keep forgetting how long the quiz is. Taxes are $9,000 a year, and the house closes on June 15th. The taxes were prepaid for the second quarter. So the second quarter they were prepaid until the end of June. First quarter is January, February, March. Second quarter is April, May, and June. So the homeowner paid his taxes all the way to June 30th. Okay, so the taxes were prepaid for the second quarter, but we're closing on June 15th. And since we're closing on June 15th, the seller has paid the taxes all the way to June 30th. So what it means is that the seller is going to get a credit, and the buyer now is going to live in the house from June 15th to June 30th without having to pay the taxes. So the buyer is going to get a debit. So it's going to be a credit to the seller and a debit to the buyer, but of how much? So first of all, we're going to take the yearly taxes, which are $9,000, and divide it by 12. Now we see the taxes are $750 a month. At the beginning of the test, they're going to tell you to use 30-day months. So we're going to say $750 a year divided by $750 a month divided by 30 days in a month is $25 a day. So we have 5 months at $750 plus $25 a day for 15 days is $41.25 is what the seller should have paid, but the seller went ahead and prepaid the whole second quarter, which is $4,500, half of the whole second quarter, half the year he paid, which is $4,500. That means the seller really only owed $41.25 because he didn't live in the house for the last 15 days, which means there's got to be a credit given to the seller of $375. And by the way, a debit to the buyer of $375. And this is a typical test question on debits and credits. Geez, I keep forgetting how long this quiz was. The sidewalk needs to be poured. It's a yard wide, 6 inches deep, and 100 feet long. How much concrete is needed? So let's convert all of this stuff to feet. 6 inches is 5 feet. So that's 0.5. 100 feet is 100 feet. That's 100. And 1 yard, because it's a yard wide, is 3 feet. So now we're going to multiply 0.5 times 100, which is 50, times 3 is 150 feet squared, is what we have here. And now we want to convert it to cubic yards. How do we convert to cubic yards? We divide by 27. So 150 divided by 27 tells us that we're going to need 5.55 cubic yards. And of course, when you order concrete, you can't order a partial cubic yard. So the answer would be 6 cubic yards. A house sells for $400,000. The commission is split 2.5% to the listing side and 3% to the buy side. That means the total commission was going to be 5%. How much more will the buy side broker receive? Because he's getting 3%. The other side's getting 2.5. So we would look at 400,000 times 2.5. That's how much the listing is getting. And then we would look at 400,000 times 3%. That's how much the buy side was getting. Then we would take the buy side number and subtract the listing side number, and that would be how much more the buy side broker would receive. So 400,000 times 0.025, $10,000 is how much the listing broker is going to get. $400,000 times 0.03 is how much the buy side is going to get. That means the buy side is going to get $2,000 more than the listing side. This is a front-end ratio question. A buyer has $120,000 a year in income. On his loan principal it's 100,000 a month, 1,000 a month. Interest is 400 a month. Taxes are $8,000 a year. Insurance is $600 a year. What is his front end ratio? So remember, front end ratio was PITI divided by income. PITI divided by income. So principal, interest, taxes, and insurance divided by income. You add all these things up, it comes up to 25,400. This is by the year, divided by his income by the year. So if you do it by the year, everything has to be by the year, and that brings a 21.16% front end ratio. And that's under 28%. That means he could easily afford to buy that house. He could easily afford to buy his the house that had this kind of a payment. This is the same question again, but we're going to add his car payment, because now this is a back end ratio question or a debt ratio. So again, we have his principal, interest, taxes, and insurance, plus his yearly car payment divided by his yearly income. And now we see that his ratio is 29.17%. And again, typically a lender wants to see that ratio be under 50%. So this particular buyer could easily qualify for the loan that would require this level of payment. A buyer is buying a $200,000 house with 10% down. They have to pay 2 points. How much are the points? The trick here is points are loan amount. So if the house is 200,000 and the buyer's putting 10% down, how much are they borrowing? Well, they're borrowing 180,000, and points are based on the loan amount. So 180,000 is the loan amount times 2%. The points are going to be 3,600. This is a value by income problem. An apartment has 10 apartments. Each are $1,000 a month. Taxes are $5,000 a year. The mortgage is $10,000 a year. The cap rate is 8%. What's the value? Now, the trick on this question is you do not use debt service in this calculation. So we're not going to worry about what the mortgage is in value by income. We're not going to worry about what the mortgage is. So value by income is net operating income divided by the cap rate. The net operating income is 10 apartments times 10 apartments times $1,000 a month, which is $10,000 a month, times 12, which is $120,000 a year minus $5,000. So we'll look and see what we got here. 10 times 1,000 is 10,000 a month, times 12 is 120,000 a year. $120,000 a year minus $5,000 for taxes is $115,000 NOI. And if the cap rate is 8%, we're going to take the $115,000 divided by 0.08, and it gives us a value on the property of $1,437,500. So again, all we're doing is value by income is equal to the net operating income divided by the cap rate. All right. There's actually 120 questions on the exam. 10 of them don't count. So of the 110 questions that do count, you've got to get a 70%. So out of the 110 questions that do count, how many do you have to get correct? And 70% of 110 is 77 correct. Now, since there's 110 questions and you have to have 77 correct, that means if we take 110 questions and we subtract 77, that's how many you can get wrong. That's how many questions you can get wrong on the test. So I always like to look at it that you have a lot of leeway, especially on a multiple choice test, because on a multiple choice quest, you're going to have to get 77 questions right out of 110. And so that means you can have 33 wrong. So you can have 33 wrong. So you just have to make sure that you don't get more than 33 wrong. 4 or 5 math questions, maybe 6, but none harder than what we just did. We did the hardest level of math questions they may or may not have. So what we ended up doing here tonight, I apologize, is we went full blast on math. This is being recorded. I will send everybody out this recording. I don't have to edit it. I'll send it right out to you so you can watch it again and you can go over the problems slowly. I would recommend each time you try to work them yourself before you looked at the answers, just to play with it to see if you can feel the pain. And we
Bruce?
haven't, yes.
I'm sorry. A question. What happened with the 10 question that is not counting in the test? They're
So
gonna take out all the good one, the
no,
right
no,
answer.
what the
How
10
is it?
what the 10 questions are is they want to make sure that the questions are written in such a way that somebody couldn't construe the answer to be something different because they read the question slightly different and they were correct, right? They want to make sure that there's no ambiguous answers on the test. So what they do is they give these 10 extra questions that they don't count against you. They give these 10 extra questions and they see to make sure that people are understanding the questions by how many of the people get them wrong. So for instance, if they put a question on the test, a test question, if they put a question, they were trying to, an extra question, they were trying to see if the question was good on the test, and everybody got it wrong every time, that would be a pretty good indication that it was a bad question and they wouldn't use it. So they're using those 10 extra questions to test their new questions so that they can be sure that the new questions don't have some kind of a ambiguous answer that would cause people to automatically get it wrong. So they're not trying to trick you. They're just using you to create new questions later on and make sure that they're fair. That's the best I can tell you.
Bruce, one question.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
There's one slide show 8 points equal to 1% of loan. I was thinking, I'm thinking if the loan amount is different, how can you make this equalization formula? I didn't fully get that one. 8 points equal to 1% of loan.
Well, you do know the loan amount because let's go back to that one.
Because if you have a loan of 1 million, 8 points of the loan is 80K.
Right.
And 1% loan is 10K. It's different.
So I don't quite understand your question, but let's look at it in a different way. I want to find a slide that's got a lot of room to draw on. So this one's pretty good. Let's not use a million because it's too big of a number. So you're going to get $100,000. Let's do this a little different. I don't want to do it start like that. You're going to borrow. Let's just say, let's use $100,000, and the bank has offered you a 4% loan to borrow that $100,000. How much interest are you going to pay in a year?
$4,000.
$4,000 in a year, right? Now, you say to the bank, I want to give you 8% and reduce my interest rate to 3%. I want a 3% loan. So in order to do that, I have to pay 8 points. So what's 8 points on 100,000?
$8,000.
$8,000, right? So if I pay you $8,000, now my payment is going to be 3% of 100,000. Now my payment is going to be $3,000 a year, right? So if I pay you $8,000 to get that rate down to 3%, my payment is only going to be $3,000 a year.
Got it.
So how much do I save a year?
So in 8 years, it will break even.
In 8 years, it will break even, right? Because you're saving $1,000 a year, right? So what happens on the 9th year? Well, now you've broken even, but now you're starting to save money. And on the 10th year, you saved another 1,000. So there is if you know for sure you're going to stay in the house forever, it might be worthwhile to buy down your interest rate by paying the points. And each 8 points you pay buys the interest rate down 1%.
No matter the amount of the loan?
Nope. Each 8 points you pay buys the rate down 1%.
Okay.
Okay. So we didn't get to what I wanted to do tonight was chapter 3. What we're going to try to do, and we'll try to do it for next Thursday, is we're going to try to let someone who has paid for the PSI test, we're going to share their screen instead of me sharing my screen. We'll do a Zoom. I'll turn over controls to them and we'll share their screen. And please text me and email me to remind me your email, and so we can practice this one time. And then we'll go over the PSI questions very slowly, and we'll explain each question and why the answer comes up the way it does. And I think that will help us a lot. And that way, we can work our way through those PSI questions. And PSI is the one who makes the questions. So if we can do the PSI questions that they sell us, we could assume that they've got to be pretty close to the PSI questions on the test. So we'll work on that next week for next Thursday night, because we didn't get into chapter 3 at all tonight. We just did math. I'm recording this math session. I'll send this out to everybody. And then again, don't just look at the answers, because that doesn't help you. Each time one of the questions comes up, try to do the question first and then look at the answers.